Tommy Entwistle, welcome to the Extrology podcast. Great to have you on as our guest. Really looking forward to getting stuck into a whole host of topics. So welcome and you're looking great. How are you feeling? We're all good to go?
Good to go. No, thanks. I've been really looking forward to today. So yeah, let's crack on.
Well, let's start with the early days for context, because I think it's really important that we get a sense of who you are and what you're about and where you've come from. So let's start with childhood, if we can. So where did you grow up? What was childhood like for you?
Amazing. Top line. Yeah, I was born in Manchester, but my family's from a place called Oldham. But actually, I didn't really grow up in a suburban setting. So grew up in a place called Marsden, but it was right in the sticks, on a kind of a non-working farmhouse, I guess. So we had chickens and ducks and rabbits and horses and stuff, but it's next to other working farms. So all the way from being young, all I can remember is kind of the outdoors, and especially when I was really young in Marsden, a vast amount of outdoors. We were right on the Pennines, the Pennine Way. We had to deal with problems, literal kind of old-fashioned problems, like being snowed in. Not that many kind of kids get to experience the fact that, okay, we're in a house now and we probably can't get out for the next kind of 3 or 4 days because there's 6-foot snow drifts and things like that, or moors fires and things like that. So it was an amazing upbringing around there. And very close to family, because of that. Not that I was kind of imprisoned by that, but yeah, we spent a lot of time together when I was young, and very fond memories of growing up in the outdoors, and spending quite a bit of time on my own as well, which I think was quite a good thing as a child sometimes. Kind of being happy with your own company. I didn't have much choice in some ways. Me and a dog maybe is the company. I did have 2 younger sisters, and it was just great, living in the wilderness, as you can call the UK doesn't have much wilderness, but it felt like that when I was younger.
I guess the Pennines, and if you're going to define a wilderness, there won't be too many places. So Brecon Beacon spring to mind, Dartmoor perhaps, but
yeah.
To your point, it's big wide open spaces. It's rugged. It's wild. Yeah. There's a lot of fun to be had when you're a kid, right?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, my mum has a fairly kind of funny story that she likes to recount, where I was younger, and we were kind of driving home one night, and the drive home was literally a proper drive home. It was down a private road and then up another road, which was like this. Obviously, when you had any snow on it, you literally had to leave your car at the bottom, carry the shopping up the road, and it was half an hour hike from the bottom of the road. Anyway, we're driving home one day and I went, "Look, Mum, people." And she always reminds me of that, because actually in this area we didn't really see that many people. And then when we used to have hikers walk past the house on the kind of way over to the Pennine Way, it was Mom, there's people outside. I should run outside, and kind of. So yeah, it sounds a bit weird maybe that, but it was. It was a great experience to kind of ground you and learn, the kind of around the nature side of it, but also just kind of learn from a kind of hands-on thing. When you grow up around farms and stuff like that, and animals, there's some really good lessons to learn.
And so who are your heroes as a childhood, metaphorically or otherwise, the kind of posters on the wall? Who did you look up to?
Yeah, I think, because hero is a bit of a kind of, I don't know, that word to me is kind of quite difficult for me to maybe hone in on. I think the people who really inspired me at different kind of times in my life, when I was younger, kind of in primary school and then early secondary school, I played rugby league. So a lot of kind of rugby league players were my kind of heroes or inspirations, I guess. So, kind of classic kind of people back then, the Sean Edwards of the world and, the Fran Botica kind of era. I remember that really fondly and those kind of posters, I guess, were in and around. I wasn't really a big poster person, actually, but yeah, those people were really inspirations for me. And then as I kind of started to get more into the outdoor pursuit side of things, I started kind of transitioning in terms of that type of hero again, that person who kind of led the way. And I think like looking up to people like Jeff Lowe in the US, proper alpinists, who really honed their skills and shared those skills, and did many first ascents, and shared that kind of wealth of knowledge. I had a super old-fashioned kind of video cassette of Jeff Lowe, which literally kind of goes through all the alpine climbing techniques, and I did genuinely run that out. It died. I must have watched that like. It sounds over the top to say 1,000 times, but I don't think it probably was 1,000 times. So I think for me, a lot of the kind of inspiration as a younger kind of person was a lot around the sports that I was interested in. And then obviously in later life started to understand mentors and inspirations around the business world, I think.
The thing that's always struck me, I digress ever so slightly, but coming on to rugby league, is that I think that rugby league is a great metaphor for life. This may seem an odd thing to say, but it's always struck me as a sport where you're going to get hit, but you have to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
The purpose of the game is to keep, no matter how hard you get hit.
There's a line.
There's a line. You've got teamwork. You could do all sorts of analogies, but fundamentally, you're going to get hit, but you have to get up and you have to move forward again.
Yeah.
And it's actually quite an interesting. I'm sure there'll be, if there are any psychologists listening, they'd butcher my thought process. But I think it's an interesting look at how we're going to get hit. We have to keep getting up.
Yeah, I think
it's a tough sport, right? It's a hard sport.
Oh, it's super hard, and like
great fun, but it's a hard sport.
Those things I remember, as a child, like watching players go off and get their lips stitched up. He's just gone. Who was it? Gary Connolly,
right?
Like got literally smashed in a game, and like he's walking off and his lips like hanging off, and then next minute he like trots back on, and they're like, they've just put 8 stitches in his lip, and he seems to be okay now. And it was like, wow, he literally is like, somebody like scratching you. That was That really, to me, really showed that resilience, I guess. And that's also kind of where I found other kind of later life experiences in sport, in similar environments, really, that kind of, you're gonna get hurt, in, more so in certain sports than others. But, as well, like the rugby league thing for me was quite a cultural thing. In Oldham, rugby league is a big deal in Oldham. I was lucky enough to play for Oldham town team when I was younger. I'm not name dropping, but certain other people who played around that time in kind of connected like teams, different age groups, maybe, people like Kevin Sinfield,
right.
Those were people again, if you said, who did you look up to? There's a lot of people who were older than you and, were playing on the big stage, but then there's a lot of people in and around me who, you knew, especially with somebody like Sinfield, you knew they were going to be something, So yeah, Oldham is a bit of a breeding ground for great players. People like Yeston Harris, Barry McDermott, Sinny, people like that. It was just brilliant to kind of see those people who you also like occasionally saw out and about, and then the next minute, they go on and they become more than world class players. They become icons, really. So.
The thing that strikes me, though, about, I guess, the contrast with rugby league and, I just define it loosely, mountaineering, climbing mountains, is one clearly is a team pursuit with individual components, the other of which, I guess there is a team element, but fundamentally the climb is an individual. Is that fair enough? I guess where I'm going is the two strike me as deeply contrasting, and yet clearly from your own perspective, equally as appealing.
I think there's many fundamental parallels, really.
Really interesting.
Yeah. Just even in the simplicities, like if you are climbing, you often need somebody who belays you. And, really super simple things, like you need to trust in that person. You don't have 10 people holding that rope. for you. But you have somebody who ultimately, if they're reaching for a sausage roll halfway through something and they take their mind off the game, and so do you at the same time, the risks there are pretty evident. You're potentially dying in that situation. But I think there are parallels. There's the try line, and then there's the summit. And there's the resilience of getting through that, like you said, getting up. If you're climbing through big snow fields or whatever, that it's hard work, and sometimes a bit like getting smashed in a rugby tackle is not fun, and it hurts. So I think there are quite a number of parallels. But then to your point, what is that team? It's made up of individuals first and foremost. That's what a team is. Each individual has an important role to play, and I think if you are completely reliant on an individual, it doesn't work. But then you are, to a degree, reliant that they do their individualities and get you to where you need to be. So I think there are some parallels between mountaineering and Rugby League and other sports. Obviously, when you get into literally more individual sports like boxing, for example, there's only you and your opponent in the ring. But I still think that when you take a step back, you understand your support crew and the people around you. Every single sport really is a mixture of that individual, but with a really important team.
What do you think I guess coming back to the Rugby League, your point around Rugby League, culturally, it was something that was very much a part of the community in which you'd found yourself. But respectfully, I suspect mountaineering less so. So what was the appeal? What was it about? What was the allure? What was the appeal of that video that you wore out 1,000 times? What was it that kept pulling you back in?
For me, it was that kind of emotional connection with the outdoors. And I think that again started at a young age, growing up where I grew up. I think as well, it was something that was a little bit more exciting for me. I actually it wasn't like I wouldn't say it was like a career-changing injury when I was younger, when I played rugby. But it was something that it affected me, that I felt like I could look at a different sport at that point. There's a lot of kind of combining kind of stars aligning here. And then coupled with growing up and spending a lot of time with my grandparents, who at that point lived in North Wales, it was kind of like a natural shift really in terms of one sport and one kind of culture. Again, the kind of grandparent thing with Rugby League, I always remember Friday evenings watching Rugby League, Super League, and shouting Kevin Iro. those players, beasts from the East, and just those like really good memories where your granddad and your grandma are shouting at the TV at a rugby match and things like that. They're not as mental as I'm portraying them to be. And then that kind of change really in me and maturing, but still wanting something that I can put myself into. And then that kind of North Wales, my other grandparents, that was like that kind of like transition into, okay, like everything's coming into mind around the outdoors, but still wanting something really physical and rewarding. But that connection, I think, was one of the major drivers of me going into rock climbing initially, but then finding my feet more. I would class as a mountaineer. I wasn't a great rock climber, but I was a fairly decent mountaineer.
How much of that influence had come from your grandparents and North Wales? What part had that played in forming that kind of that passion for you?
Massively. I know we've already touched on the kind of hero question. But they were very inspirational in my life, and they still are. They're not both around anymore, but my grandma still is. She's 93. So their influence, not just in terms of that pursuit, but also just in terms of spending time with them during the 6 weeks holidays. Didn't get farmed off by my mum, by the way, but, I went and stayed with them for a good number of weeks through that usual 6 weeks period. And that kind of grew as I got older. When I was younger, it might be 1 or 2 weeks max, and then we'd meet in Bangor and like a Little Chef. Do you remember the Little Chefs?
Yeah.
I'd jump out and I'd jump in, my mum's car, and they'd drive back to Oldham. And then that kind of like got longer and longer, really, to the point where, I was going for maybe 4, sometimes 5 weeks of those school holidays and being in North Wales. So at that point then, both of my grandparents had done a lot of like just general walking, if you want to call it, hiking, like the West Highland Way, and they used to go on big walking holidays, and they'd done, a lot of Munros and all the kind of Three Peaks and all of those types of usual things. But my kind of grandfather as well had kind of climbed more and done certain things. So yeah, that definitely trickled into me really quickly. And, I remember the first kind of mountain.
I was just going to ask you that. Do you remember what was that first mountain climb? How would you describe that?
So they lived on the Llane Peninsula. So they lived in a place called Former-Thrudark, which is kind of, a lot of people would know Abersoch as a kind of, I guess, a touristy place. So on the peninsula, there's a set of 3 mountains which are actually called the Rivals, and the central part to that is called Arrival. And that was the kind of the first mountain I climbed, really, I guess. Obviously, I guess you could call it a mountain, but most people who...
It's interesting. Just watch. I've got the benefit, obviously, of seeing your reaction as you're recalling the memory.
Yeah.
Do you remember how that? And it's a lovely expression. You can see that what it means to you in a without wishing to sound trite. But do you remember how you felt when you arrived at the summit and you thought, actually, do you know what this is? How did that make you feel?
I don't. Honestly, I don't remember that necessarily, that single moment. But what I remember that moment to be was the kind of catalyst for me thinking, I enjoyed that. It was really, really hard, and the most important thing that I think that I had as a child, which I always tried to keep hold on to as I grew up through mountaineering, is that kind of enjoying the journey, I guess. And I've definitely forgot that at many points in my life, and touch on maybe certain people who have tried to remind me of that, certain mentors who I've worked with, and it's very difficult because a lot of people do think of certain sports, or let's say mountaineering or whatever that is okay, yeah, the winning, yeah, okay, what score was it, or did you get to the top? Those are the questions that I think get thrown out. Like, I played football today, okay, what was the score? And I think that's quite kind of, I played a game, what was the end result? But actually there's a lot in the middle. And for me, like, mountaineering kind of, it forces you to kind of feel that, I guess, during what you're doing, because it's not a quick thing. No. It's
literally one step at a time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not like throwing a dart on a dartboard, which has like, throw the dart, know the result. Climbing a big mountain, especially also in winter, which I got to kind of enjoy more the winter side of things, is a long time outdoors.
Why? What was the appeal of the winter, of the elements, if you like?
You know what? I think some of it probably was from the rugby side of things, because obviously you play rugby in like the most horrendous conditions. I remember in the days where you're allowed to get back into a, I don't think they allow it nowadays, but you had a bath at the end.
Yeah.
You always like, I don't know whether they still do that.
I don't probably think they do, but
due to obvious reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. But that was sport, right? You got 22 blokes in a bath at the end of a game. That's kind of how it
absolutely
worked.
Yeah. So I remember a particular game up in Barrow, and it was like on this pitch, and this pitch was kind of built onto the side of a housing estate, and it was, long story short, it was freezing, and it was like hailstoning, and it was windy, and to the point where the mums and dads actually were parked next to the pitch, sat in their cars, watching the game. So we're like 11, 12 playing this game, and then we're all like, we were absolutely nailed. And then we're all in the bath at the end, full kit, still with our boots on, because we were so cold we couldn't take our clothes off or like unlace our boots. And I remember a couple of people were passing inhalers around, and they weren't even people with asthma. They were like giving kids like inhalers, like, are you all right? And like kids like half spaced out, and the coach is like, have some of that. No, I had to feel a bit better now. So I think that kind of that pain, that kind of knowing that getting through that pain and resilience, that journey there is going to be a reward at the end of that. If you stick to it, and like you said, step by step, it's a hard road, but yeah, I think there's an element of that, and I boxed for a little bit as well in between that. I've always kind of trained myself, and my grandfather from Oldham, he was a rugby league player. He kind of like taught me when I was young. He had a punch bag in his garage and things like that. So then this whole kind of rugby league and boxing and kind of mountaineering, they all kind of for me felt quite similar. But they also then, especially the boxing and the mountaineering, when I was kind of in my late teens, early 20s, they started to kind of unusually complement each other. And I think probably the simplicities around that were the cardio side of things from boxing. But again, like you said, everybody wants to be a boxer until they get hit in the face. And it's that kind of knowledge of that they're quite complementary, really, because you're setting out to do something, knowing full well it's not actually going to be very nice.
Let's talk a bit about early career. So Snow and Rock was very much a formative part of. We touched on this off camera of those early career days. Let's go through that story. How did you end up working at Snow and Rock?
So again, short story. I got made redundant from an engineering company that I worked for in Oldham, and I've always wanted to work. So for me,
well, even just looking at. I keep coming back to as we're talking, and apologies for the interruption, but I keep having, this is going to sound now like such a cliche because we're going to come on to Thrudark, but endeavour through adversity is a consistent theme through everything that you've talked about and you've described from those early days. Now, I was going to link that seamlessly through to Thrudark later,
well,
but
I'm not clever enough to have
I kept coming back to it. Well, it's there. It's kind of who you are, which is really interesting.
Yeah, like that kind of that seamless link is a real thing. For sure, I'm not just kind of like painting a false picture around that.
Work ethic is. You mentioned you've always wanted to work. There's a real work ethic to all of the endeavours that you've been describing. They require of you to keep going. Absolutely.
And that's when I got made redundant. It was a shock to me. It was like because I was quite anxious about it, So on the Monday when I got made redundant, I was super upset. Went home, I've not got a job, And for me, this earning thing was quite. It was quite a big thing in my kind of household, really, with my with my parents. Not in the sense of like a kind of toxic earnings, just like they work really hard. Short story, And as a child, I always saw them. As working really hard, and when they came home, you could tell they've put their all into it, So then I sat down, and my mum kind of said, well, you just need to sit down and like kind of clear your mind of questions, the old Yoda adage, and what do you love? What is the perfect scenario? And obviously, I loved being outdoors. The idea at that point of me traveling was a really important thing because I was quite kind of intrinsic in that kind of village that I kind of grew up with, and everything's kind of close, and everybody knows each other and things like that.
But there's also a kind of wanderlust theme pushing through from North Wales or the Pennines on the moors or whatever it is. There's an adventurer in there that almost wants to eke itself out.
Yeah, I felt like, okay, well, if North Wales is like it is, I wonder what Norway is, and things like that. So essentially, a couple of things kind of tied into good timing, really. I was when I used to get the Oldham Evening Cron out and look for jobs. So anyway, funny enough, in the Cron was Snow and Rock.
What sort of age was you been about this point? Early 20s?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think I was like I'd be like 22, I think.
Yeah.
Around that. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. But you're right. Yeah, early 20s. Could have finished there. Exact. How many months? So yeah, I saw that. But I had quite a number of friends and also kind of like connected friends in the Royal Marines who sometimes, occasionally, we climbed with or just went out and hiked. You know, we go to North Wales and hike up Trivan or something like that. And they taught me kind of basic rope work, you know, before I started actually rock climbing, just simple things like if you're scrambling and stuff like that. So, you know, there was definitely this kind of, well, what is going to allow me to do what I love doing? Definitely not, you know, certain things, definitely others. So I definitely considered, I said definitely about 6 times then, considered the military for sure, because of certain people that I'd surrounded myself with. But then this snow and rock thing. So made redundant on the Monday, had an interview on the Wednesday, got offered the job on the Thursday, obviously left my old job on the Friday. I'll tell you a fun story about that if you want me to. But,
yeah, I'd love
to. And then they said, can you start on the Saturday? And the Saturday was the first grand opening day on Princess Parkway on the way into Manchester. And I'm not proud of this, but I actually said no because I had a football match. But I thought, actually, I'm gonna have like a separation, you know, have a game of football on the Saturday and then leave my old job behind. And then I started on the Sunday. But yeah, on the Friday night when I left there, so there was no animosity there, but I kind of felt that I was young and I was like, and I did keep getting shouted at by one of the directors for driving my car in too quickly to the car park of the engineering firm. So I thought, F you, I'm going to like wheel spin out of this place on Friday. I've been made redundant. I don't owe you anything. I'm going to wheel spin out. So I got in my car and I opened both my windows and I cranked up the music. Like it was probably like really naff 90s music. Oh no, it wasn't 90s music, but you know what I mean? Dance music. And I put my mobile phone on the dashboard and I wheel spun out and I drove around the corner to a petrol station that, funnily enough, I worked when I was even younger. And I was like, where's my phone? So I said, can I just use the phone to the guy in the garage? And he was like, I phoned Pete down at the engineering place. And he went, your phone's outside on the floor. It flew out your window as you drove out and wheel spun. And like all the like directors were like stood up laughing at you as you drove out. So that was like a big lesson of like, don't be arrogant. Don't like try to kick anybody on the way out. But so yeah, I started on the Sunday, back to Stone Rock. Started on the Sunday morning. I walked in, this quite vivid memory. Walked in, I said to Steve, the manager who'd interviewed me, and said, yep, here's the job. Got my uniform. I had like a kind of outdoor uniform. And then walked up the stairs. And as I walked up the stairs, this super attractive lady came down the stairs towards me. And I was like, hello, I'm Tom back then, Tommy now. She was like, oh, hi Tom, I'm Ella. And I was, oh, nice to meet you. And as I got to the top of the stairs, I bumped into one of the guys who was also he was part of the snowboard team, Jowett, Adam Jowett. And he was like, she's pretty fit. And I was like, yep. And very, very long story short, I ended up marrying her.
Yeah, it's an incredible story. Day one in the job. Day one in the job. So you go from that, you know, which let's be honest, I mean, I think sadly we live in a world now where it's increasingly rare you find anyone that hasn't faced redundancy at some point in their working life.
For sure.
But I think if we go back 20 odd years, more than that, 20, 30 years, there was still a stigma attached.
Stigma is the word I was going to use.
And
absolutely.
I think that to have been through that process, undeniably, you wouldn't have. I think most people would have felt at least some pang of hurt. This got to hurt a little bit. There's a sense of there's a rejection that comes through that. You go from that kind of on a Friday, and you say you want to get the wheel spinning out the car park as kind of 2 fingers up to the prior regime.
Big time.
Perfectly understandable. I think, whether you're 22 or 52, I think there's an element of that.
Yeah.
But then
keep your windows open is the lesson. Yeah.
But to then 48 hours, best part of 48 hours later, to meet the woman who ultimately ends up becoming your wife.
But isn't that a great lesson?
Great lesson in life.
Yeah, I'm trying not to be too spiritual, but there is a but. There are definitely certain things that have happened that are kind of fate. And
I've said it 1,000 times on this podcast, reference Sliding Doors of the film.
Absolutely.
It's so true of life. Had you not taken the Snow and Rock job, what would life be now? None of us know. But actually, so there's a whole series of left turns, right turns.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't have got into Snow and Rock without that kind of grandparent nurture in the outdoors, and more so the kind of the mountains of the outdoors. That was the big thing. And I'll be honest about the whole kind of military side of it. I definitely didn't kind of consider that as soon as I started at Snow and Rock in Manchester, because of the group of people that were there. It was this flagship store. There was a real buzz around it. It was incredibly busy. The first ski season that we had there, it was absolutely crackers. And, at the end of that, these kind of 20, 25, 30 people were super close friends, like really close.
Why? What was it about that group of people that made it special, do you think?
I think Steve did a great job at leadership, the manager. He worked so hard at that kind of, how do I galvanize these people together? And it wasn't on the so they can make this whole thing successful either. It came from a really good place on, like, he just loved that kind of store community of people there. So I think leadership was one. I think they were very lucky to get those kind of characters and dynamics at that point. Lucky's maybe the wrong word, but they were that whole kind of click that happened very, very quickly. And again, nurtured through Steve was why, so Jowett, the guy at the top of the stairs, who said my wife was fit, he ended up being a witness at my wedding. So those ties are still like super, super strong now.
Yeah. I say those relationships you form at that stage in your working life, I think clearly some of them go on forever, but they're hugely influential, I think. What do you think that early, that Snow and Rock experience? Because I remember we talked about it. There was a, and you've referenced it here. There was an energy to the place, and there was a dynamism to it, and there was a sense that you were all pulling. There was an excitement, I guess. It sounds like you had a really great group of people as well. What do you think that early experience equipped you with? What did you learn from it, I guess?
I learned from it that ultimately nothing works without great people. That shop was like brand spanking new. You could, and they'd spent a lot of money on it. You could eat gravy off the floor of that thing on the first kind of day of it opening. And to be honest, through the discipline that we all had, you could eat gravy off the floor for many months afterwards. It was absolutely spotless. But I think that I don't necessarily think that I learned those things there and then, but I've had the kind of retrospect to understand what it gave me and ultimately kind of armored me with is that great people. Because you could have taken exactly the same shop, in the same location, everything. It also had great product in there.
Yeah.
The ability to invest at that point, Snow and Rock. They put everything into that place. The best brands. They had like exclusives on certain brands that nobody else in the UK had. So setting yourself up for success, let's call it. It could have come crumbling down pretty quickly if those people in that first kind of couple of years, because it was quite solid in those first couple of years with the team, if they hadn't have gelled and just absolutely worked for the benefit of each other. There was a massive amount of pride in that place in that first kind of 12, 18 months. And I'm only saying that first 12, 18 months because I kind of moved, started to move on after that.
Yeah. So Osprey would lead us nicely into... let's talk about that, because that's a significant chunk of career experience before we really dive into where you are today. But what attracted you to? Let's talk about Osprey. What attracted you to Osprey? What was the story behind it?
There is a slight back connection. I don't mean to step back, but
no, please do.
Snow and Rock had Osprey packs in, and they were very different. They were very cutting edge. They looked different. There was other pack brands around that were far more, I guess, kind of conventional at that point. And one thing that I really enjoyed doing was spending a lot of time fitting mountaineering boots and packs. And I found that time investment had a massive impact, not just in terms of selling product there and then, but in terms of long-term value of customers. So, we got to the point after those first kind of 12, 18 months where we knew a lot of customers by first name, and they were happy with that. And the whole time it takes to fit a pack really kind of, it got me because there's a lot that's going on. And people look at packs sometimes and think it's just a pack. But I got quite into the technologies and things like that. So that kind of movement. Can I just do a little bit in between?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm going to come back to that. I have a question as well for what you've just said. But
let me just
go back.
blurt.
Yeah. So
I went to New Zealand and did like a ski season in Wanaka and climbed a bit as well. Did some cool stuff. And then at the same time, my wife, she went to South America. So we weren't apart, like romantically, let's say. But we were apart physically and geographically. That was very diplomatic, wasn't it? So then when I came back, we moved in together. We went and lived in Sheffield. I worked for Snow&Rock at the Sheffield ski centre. And then we moved back down to London. At that point, I was kind of employed as the Snow&Rock nationwide, they called it mountain department back then, which was kind of slightly all-encompassing. So I was the trainer on all that, product trainer, et cetera, et cetera. So then, back to your point around Osprey, we had a training session from Rob, who was the founder, managing director of Osprey Europe. And kind of I was involved. It was like train the trainer back then. So I'd always said, and this honestly isn't a lie, that when I was at Snow&Rock, if I was ever able to work for any brand, that I would love to work for Osprey because it was so unique and it still had a huge founder's mentality, back then with the ownership structure and things like that. Or another outdoor brand, which isn't around much actually anymore. It was quite a specific North American brand from Jackson Hole, which is called Cloudveil. Now, beknown to me, Osprey Europe, even though it was called Osprey Europe then, it was also a distributor for Cloudveil. So like when Rob came in and said, I represent Osprey and Cloudveil, I was like, ugh. Those literally were the two brands that I always kind of talked about. In terms of the technicality and the positioning in the market, etc. So when that happened, Rob then said, "Let's have a lemonade." A pub around the corner from the M25 church, Snow&Rock's M25 Chertsey store. The energy from Rob was. And the charisma from him was like, there was no force field to that. It was literally like, absolutely absorbing. And then, for me, like this whole like brand, like who do you want to work for? Like Osprey. Okay, cool. And then if we said, okay, here's the MD and he rolls in and he's like, he doesn't have anything, it's that whole product and people thing for me, it'd have been like, if only like this MD was like bouncing with energy. Anyway, Rob was,
They were aligned. They were very much aligned.
Absolutely.
The perception of the product and the brand and the people behind it, the stars were aligned on that.
100%.
Yeah.
It was an absolute kind of, match made in heaven between Rob and that brand as well. So that really was the kind of the main gravitas from my side to look more into it, and he started again, I won't go into the super granules, but, he said there are certain things happening. They were growing at that point. They had a huge, opportunity. They were like walking into retailers at that point saying, we're Osprey, and retailers were going, who the hell is Osprey?
I want to come back to something you said earlier around, because it relates to the product and it relates to where, again, it's coming through, but the I'm going to use the word fascination, but around the materials and the products themselves.
Yeah.
You've struck me, you're very thorough, very detail conscious. I see that is that something, was there a point at which you became very conscious of that? Was that something that it's that whole nature nurture debate. Had you become that way because you naturally got a real interest in the products you were representing? Or as part of me that as we were talking was thinking, well, mountaineering, you have to be aware of the finite details, right? You have to be, because a wrong decision, if something's wrong with a piece of kit and you're out there on the side of a mountain, it's literally life or death stuff.
Yeah. So I'm selling pieces of kit.
Yeah.
In a retail environment.
Is it nature nurture? Were you always kind of like that? Or was that something you learned, or was it?
See, I don't think that I think I am kind of thorough. But I also think that I'm a little bit impatient sometimes with detail. I think...
which is interesting when you mentioned, and I apologise again, I interrupted, but you mentioned spending a lot of time, fitting a pack, fitting boots. So there's a desire to get it right.
There is
for the person who's experiencing the brand, the Snow and Rock, whatever the boots are. There's that comes through as well.
Yeah, there is. But then there's also, I think, what I've learned about my personality is, and I guess I don't want to contradict myself here about, I've played a game of football, what's the score, is I think my line of detail, I think I'm quite good at drawing a line at a certain point when I feel there's enough detail to make a decision. Yeah. As going back to pack fitting, usually somebody can fit a backpack in 10 minutes. So if I took 30 minutes and then that person was kind of like, I'm not quite sure. Yeah, absolutely. That would annoy me. That would kind of classify as a loss, let's call it, a loss in sale. And I think that as I've gone through different businesses, I'm kind of alert to kind of procrastination and kind of going too much into that's why I said granules before, the granularities of things. But I think I've understood through nurture, especially again with mentors during my kind of professional life, you definitely need detail, but then it's pointless looking at the detail if you're not prepared to make a decision at the end of the detail. And that to me is kind of quite an important thing of my personality is I'll be pretty detail driven, but then I also understand, okay, you need to draw a line at some point and you might decide not to do anything, but that's a decision at the end of the day, or you might decide to move on from what you found out. But yeah, I think from learning, learning through those early years of working at Osprey, that entrepreneurial kind of spirit, which again was part of Rob's ability, and he was always incredibly open to sharing these things. A lot of people kind of say knowledge is power. It was absolutely the opposite. The sharing kind of culture there was amazing towards myself, but that entrepreneurial go, it was just so exciting.
And as a business, an awful lot of blood, sweat, and tears would have gone into it. But you enjoyed over a period of years, a sustained, a meteoric rise. I mean, is meteoric the right word? It suggests that it was accelerated over a shorter period, but the business was on a sustained path of growth, a trajectory of growth.
Absolutely,
very successful.
I don't think it's unfair to say it was meteoric. It was. In the first kind of 4 or 5 years, I think the business doubled. Each year for pretty much 4 or 5 years consecutively at the beginning. There's a market report in the UK that gives you a kind of market shares. We went from 9th out of 9, into the top 3 pretty quickly. And then once we got to number 1, we kept that position. And I believe I believe they're still number one. So I think it took 5, 6, 7 years to go from 9 to first place, and ever since then they kept it. So you know what? I think that's fairly meteoric.
Absolutely, that's a fair point. And for context, what was the sort of, I guess if headcount were an indication, or size and scale, but what did Osprey look like when you joined, and what did it look like when you left?
Well, very different.
Yeah,
very, very different. Like just to be clear, and I'm sure some people listening, on this will be people who are still connected to Osprey. I am very conscious of saying it's different, not, in my viewpoint, not better, worse, good, bad.
Yeah,
and I think the differences are just apparent through using numbers. There was 6 people when I started. It turned over, I think it was probably just under €3 million, something like that. And then when I left, there was very close to 70 people. When I started, those 6 people included warehouse people, and then the 70 people roughly of what I believe it to be up until when I left. That wasn't inclusive of kind of warehouse operations. And it was around €60 million, something like that. So 3 to 60 million, pretty quickly in some regards, And I think what was really interesting is, again, from a competitiveness, we were pretty competitive with the Americans. Obviously, Osprey is an American brand, started in Santa Cruz, etc. But they turned over a certain amount. We always used to say, yeah, but you had like 40 years on us. You started in '74 in America. You're still in America. This is your revenue. We're playing catch up, and we're not actually that far behind. You guys better, all in like friendly competitiveness, etc. But yeah, I think other differences is, you have to put in processes and more departments and structure. And sometimes, when you are a smaller kind of speedboat, and there's only a couple of you on the boat, and somebody says, wow, look at that beach over there. You can go, yep. You can go over there and do whatever you want, have a barbecue. Whereas when you're on a big cruise liner, it's like, oh, that's a lovely beach over there. Should we go and have a barbecue? Like, you can't go, yeah, okay, let's turn the ship.
Yeah, it's a good analogy. I like that.
I think that's something that definitely is different. But that's what happens. You have to have more people, more process, more product. Things, and it's that kind of the fuel of it, and the structure around that fuel has to kind of embody it, and that some of those things are really boring. I won't lie. Some of those things I found to be frustrating and boring. I understood why they were in there, but it didn't stop me from getting frustrated.
But to your point, a business with 6 people has to be by its very definition very different to a business with 70 people in it.
It has to be. Yeah, it's like.
And to your point, it's not that it's better or worse. It's just different.
Exactly. Yeah, if you want to get 5 people from here across the road, now it's 70 people, you need more people to do that, more process, more safety guards, and etc. But yeah, for me, that time in my life and working with Rob was an incredible journey. And personally to him, I owe him a lot. And other people, Dagner, the finance director, who's still at Osprey Europe, very, very close friends, and other people in and around that, parts of the sales team and the marketing teams who I'm still really good friends with. And it was hard to make that decision to leave. But, I don't mean to like seamless link, but, it was, when it feels right, and nothing could have, nothing could have got in the way of me making that decision because I knew.
And I'm good. I want to come on to that. It's a beautiful link. Thank you.
Doing your job for you.
Around Thrudark. I just one question as to that Osprey experience before we move on.
Yeah.
Was around what you felt not necessarily what did it equip you? What did you gain, do you think, from that? What did you learn from that Osprey experience?
Like most importantly, I learned how important and beneficial it is to run a business when you think of people before you think of anything else. And I wasn't very good at it to begin with. And I got better at it. But I only wish I'd have probably started to look through those binoculars a little earlier on, rather than looking through the binoculars of success, really, in some ways. But the success was the thing that was giving me emotional reward, like ex-retailer, kind of is in this position, and, this is the amount of, these are the orders they generally give, and this is the connection we have with them. And then seeing those kind of relationships over years, like, get better and let's be honest, bigger. Nothing ever happens unless somebody sells something, is a good saying. So expectations were, we weren't going into that journey going, yeah, should we be flat next year? That wasn't what it was. So I think I definitely learned that I was probably pretty immature in some ways from a professional perspective. And again, that's why I owe a lot to the people who either mentored me or supported me. And I definitely then understood the boring things are sometimes really, really important. And, there's lots of things that have come out of my time there. I think for me, I like to keep things really simple, but sometimes I keep them a little bit too simple. So the balance of life between so many things, that whole balance, equation is really hard. Because, on one side of it, you want to get more orders and you want to do all these things, but to do that, you've got to do all these other things and the processes. And some of the kind of the forward thinking, that was something else that was really instilled in me, is it's good to think 6 months out, but actually you also need to take time out to think, okay, what is our 3, 5, 5 max, generally speaking, just because you don't know what might happen after 5 years. It becomes a little bit kind of arbitrary after that, in my opinion. But you've got to sit down sometimes and say, okay, we're here now, we'll be there then. Okay, what's above and beyond? And those, I literally wouldn't have time to go into the amount of things that I think I learned through those, but those major kind of impacts on me. But I did sacrifice a lot as well at the same time, so I have, and I will always have, incredibly fond memories around working with the fellow directors at Osprey, and other people around that. But I did sacrifice a lot, and especially at that pinch point in my life where I was having children and things were moving pretty quickly at home. I was having to rely very heavily on my wife at that point, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I definitely regret things in some ways, and that. But it comes back to that balance equation. I thought I was doing the right thing by, spending 1 year. I spent like 200 days out of the country, right. And that was pretty much when we just had our middle child, and there's no blame to anybody's door apart from myself on that, because I could have changed that if I wanted, but I loved it. People used to say, what's the best and worst thing about your job? And you said it's the same thing, travel. I love it, but this sacrifice.
That wanderlust we touched on right from your childhood almost. Yeah,
and I'm incredibly blessed to have been able to travel the world on a company credit card, and also a company credit card that for the majority of that time was very supportive, because the founder and the owner of the business was an amazingly supportive person. It wasn't like at the end of the day you've got like £17.50 for your evening meal. You're allowed one beer, and a main course. So we didn't do things on a shoestring. We went Vietnam, the US, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Romania, Italy, France, Germany, Russia. We went to a lot of places in that time.
It's a richness of experience that comes from that.
Yeah. I think one of the best places I've ever been was Vietnam.
Really?
Yeah.
Why? What was it? What would give it that accolade? Given that you've been to so many places, it's quite something to pull that out and go, that's the one. Why?
Because it was like Grand Theft Auto in real life. Seriously, because it is chaotic.
Yeah.
Which has got such a allure to it. It's like you don't really go to that many places in your life sometimes which are genuinely like chaos, I'm sure you've seen the things about how to cross the road in Vietnam. You literally just have to walk and they'll drive around you. Things like that, which is just like completely mental. But I also think that I was, again, lucky enough to explore away from some of the big cities like Ho Chi Minh and go on motorcycle rides into proper Vietnam, let's call it. And the culture and the family side of what they do, how they live, is amazing, and obviously every single place in the world has a dark side to it. Bournemouth has a dark side to it. Ho Chi Minh definitely does. But I think as well, it's what you look for, isn't it? And when you look for what the real culture is in Vietnam, it absolutely radiates. Really warm, the people. I don't mean warm from a weather perspective. They are really warm.
They're a warm, friendly,
they're warm. Culture again, and I think that was just something that I'm very, very lucky to have experienced. Yeah, I went to Vietnam, I think 9 or 10 times over the space of years as well, and that was also really cool because like each year, you went, you were like, where did that building come from? And this building over here's got a helipad on it. Like last time we were here, it was like tiny little kind of whatever it was, shop or whatever. So yeah, that was also quite cool to see their progression as well.
I'd imagine that multicultural and richness of experience informs you from not only from a personal perspective, but also impacts then. I think you learn so much as how to engage with people, how to treat people, how to deal with people, how to deal with the challenges that people might present. There's so much. As I say, it's a richness of experience.
Yeah, it's quite. It can be, especially at night in Vietnam, it become quite polarized. You can walk down a street and you'll have to look after yourself. You've got to be super streetwise, but the next person you meet would be just a genuinely like super friendly person. So like 1 minute you're like, the hairs on the back of your neck are light up and you're like, wait, keep an eye out. Like, something's going to kick off. And literally within a second, somebody's like, and so it does teach you things of how to manage your behaviors, making the right decisions in those types of situations. But yeah, I think that kind of experience of being able to travel, being able to learn, and being able to share that with people who, again, were literally joined at the hip for well over a decade. And then also to look back and say, yeah, we had an amazing time. Yeah. We did pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think that is a massive kind of learning to also try to look at it like that whilst you're doing it, not just retrospectively.
Why Thrudark?
Well, is this when I tell the story about I met Stas in a toilet in Ashley Cross?
You can tell it however you like.
That's the number one. Next question. So I followed Thrudark as soon as they came on the scene. For me, the edge, the purpose, the tone, everything, I'm just talking about how I read into it at the beginning. This is without knowing.
How did you first discover the brand? Was there a moment you thought, this is, do you recall that? Or is something you just kind of, these guys are doing some interesting things.
I can't actually recall it specifically. It will have, I definitely found them through their social channels.
Yeah.
It was how it looked to me on the outside was actually how I felt a little bit about the outdoor industry in some ways. Like my kind of frustrations with the outdoor industry is that, and don't get me wrong, like I'll have been through certain situations looking into different products where there's a little bit of kind of magpieing, let's call it. Not copying, but definitely magpieing. Inspiration, whatever you want to call it. But for me, like the outdoor industry kind of like all came onto the M1. A lot of brands like ended up like coming onto the same motorway, driving the same car, going in the same direction, telling the same stories, driving at the same speed limit. And for me, what caught my attention was again, just from the outside initially was, no, we're making our own road. Like, we're not on that motorway. No way. We're going to, in fact, screw cars. Who wants a car? We're going to we're going to jump on a scrambler and we're going to bash through the woods and we're going to get to the same destination, but we think we can do it quicker. We're not going to sit in traffic. We're going to do it our way. And that's what it felt like to me. I don't know why I got a little bit short then. I was a bit sad, sorry.
Respectfully, I'm not sure I agree with that. I think it's sad. I think what comes through from that is that you have an affinity. Did it mean something to you?
Yeah, it did.
And I think there aren't, and that's a fortunate position in which to find yourself, respectfully. There aren't that many people that through the course of their work that are, I suppose, I suspect if we got away from the kind of vocational type of work that, children's nurse or something like that, there are people who do work, everybody works for differing reasons. But to have something that is, you have a real passion and affinity with and you really identify with and you're proud of, which clearly comes through, is quite rare in my experience.
It is rare. Again, you seamless link me. So I got a bit, I don't know, I didn't make it up. I must have pinched it from somebody at some point, but the 2 a.m. club. So this can include like friends. I'd hope it'd include family, but, and maybe even people can ask themselves this in terms of like the people they work around is, if at 2:00 in the morning you phone somebody and you said, you need to get out of bed straight away, get in your car and come over here, I need your help. That was it. And they put the phone down. Be an interesting kind of scenario to run that, because I'm sure some people would be able to genuinely say, I have got 3 or 4 close friends and I know that all 4 of them would jump in their car straight away. But I'm sure a lot of people have got 25 friends, and actually the reality is none of those 25 would actually get out of their bed at 2:00 in the morning. So I'm working that back to the point that when I met Staz in the toilet, he was on the, I'll tell it just so in case people are thinking, what actually happened in the toilet?
Yeah, people are going to want to know.
Yeah. So he's in the urinals and he's on the blower, and like, not obviously he's northern, so I'm like, hey up, like X, Y, Z. So start talking, obviously finish off what we're doing. And then he said, what do you do? So I said, blah, blah, I work at Osprey, etc. I said, what do you do? So he said, just in the process of moving away from a military career, and we started a clothing brand. And I said, is it called Thrudark? And he said, yes. And then we were like, holy shit, like you work for Osprey and you work for Thrudark. Like that's very symbiotic in terms of like even just like a connection, like just we weren't like thinking we'd become friends at that point. It was like, oh, cool. I've met somebody, because they definitely had respect for Osprey and the brand and what it's done. So, anyway, Staz then says like he was in the taxi kind of trying to text. And he said, I'll send you a text. What's your number? I was like, and I was thinking, he's super nice, like on the face of it, like trust he might text me at one point. And like literally about 7 minutes later kind of sent me a WhatsApp. And then that for me, like that connection obviously grew. And that was a number of years ago, far before kind of even thinking about a movement into the business. And again, since then, in between starting to work for Thrudark, lucky enough to socialise with Staz and Louis and some of the other team members, going to Staz's wedding, which is another couple of interesting stories. Just that investment that they put into me before anything, that real kind of connection, that 2 a.m. club for me like rang pretty loud. Because I think that's really quite ingrained in that community, and I don't just mean a special forces community. I mean from a military community, and first responders and etc. this kind of connection that they share is like, often, brothers or brothers and sisters, and they are definitely part of that 2 a.m. club.
I really like that, the 2 a.m. club. I wonder where you were going to go with that.
It.
Yeah, the 5 a.m. club is a very different analogy.
Yeah, definitely, that's different.
So, what had you set out to achieve when you joined?
That's a tricky one. That basics at the beginning.
What sort of stage? I should go back a little. I apologize for context again. But what sort of stage was the business at when you joined? Again,
that's probably useful actually, because that kind of validates my basic point of basics. Is roughly 12 months ago. There was 8 people working for Thrudark, and now we have 28.
Yeah.
So
which is phenomenal in 12 months, Miss.
Oh, yeah.
For a clothing brand.
It's phenomenal, but also it is much needed because it was pretty lean.
Yeah.
It was pretty lean, and that's not because there was like a lack of wanting to invest in that. Not in any way. There's an amazing culture around that. Incredible. It was actually probably more so that the capabilities there were like all hands on deck, like whatever needs to happen. If that's like ship 2 boxes, we'll ship 2 boxes. If that's ship 2002, we'll have them all done by the end of the day. Doesn't matter what number it is, they're getting done. But obviously that strength, then there's only a certain limit that does in reality, practicality, get you to. That definitely is a very startup mentality, which you need. You need that like blood, sweat, and tears during that. But then, what turns a startup into a scale up? So I kind of use the start, scale, soar, as in soar like a bird, because those are quite big kind of differences between how a business is set up, product, people, process. That kind of idea of like what do you need at those certain points, and there's also tipping points. Different people use different kind of numbers. It's kind of like accepted that it's a bit of an old kind of saying, but 7, 17, 70.
Right.
So once you've hit 7, you go for 17. Once you've hit 17, you go for 70. I kind of agree to that to a degree. I actually think 10 million is a big tipping point for a business. 20 million is another big tipping point. 30 million is actually another big tipping point in my experience. Maybe not the same for others, but just in mine. I almost discount 40 million because once you got to 30, you think there's a nice round number there. Yeah. It's like 10, let's go for 20, let's go for 30. 40 doesn't sound that good.
50.
Let's go for 50.
It's got to be 50.
Yeah,
right,
it's like what's after 50? Obviously, there's another round obvious number after that. So, that when I kind of came in, it was like understanding like those basics of like how do we set this company and just for the record, what I don't want this to sound like is I came in and had a silver bullet was brought in by myself. That Ben, product director, Stas, Louis, other people who were around. Gaz, head of creative. Leanne, brand manager, other people that are involved in that business and have been and have left, all have played an incredible part. Steve Clark, obviously one of the other investors, incredibly, like far more than me in terms of a wealth of knowledge. Chris Reynolds as well, who played a big part in Bremont's kind of meteoric rise. And, he's also a huge influencer into the business. So, I just wanted to set that out because I didn't want it to sound like I came in September and started kind of putting these, because a lot of these things Stas and Louis knew probably needed to be done, but they might not have had somebody to help to do them and help to do them first time in the best way, not keep kind of trying to do them and finding feet. It was almost like, okay, what are these basics we're going to put in? Even things like org chart. Okay, what is the communication platforms? Like, how do we communicate? When? Who to? In what? On what platform? These things, like, sometimes you build like layer cake as you're growing. It's a bit like you occasionally need to go into your garage and bloody clean it because you've just been adding and adding. So it was almost like the opposite of like, okay, let's do more. It was like, actually, let's do less. Let's get to a point, and then we're still kind of in that stage at the moment, even though we're still externally pushing really hard. We've got some amazing product. In the background, we're actually saying, we want this to last. And to last, it has to be built on the hardest concrete. Okay, what is that? What is that foundation? So I think I was a bit boring when I came in, because I was almost like saying, it's not what we say yes to that's actually important. It's what we say no to. Because it's pretty easy to say yes to everything. But what are we saying no to? And when I came in, I didn't really get a feeling we were, which is fair, as you're growing and you're...
I think that's hard as you're scaling as well. You kind of go, well, there is that tendency to go,
what could it be?
Yes. Yeah. Where can that take us?
It might
where
be
can
a
that
really
take
good
us?
idea.
Yeah.
But actually, it might not, and it might waste a hell of a lot of time.
Well, it's a bit like your analogy that you drew earlier with the speedboat, isn't it? If you see a nice beach and you want to go and have a barbecue on it, when there's 8 people or 6 people, you can go.
Yeah.
But eventually you can't keep going to the beach. At some point you've got to go, no, the direction of travel, we weren't going to the beach, we were going to that island over there.
Exactly.
We've got to, and that we agree that's the right destination. We have to stay on course.
That also adds to strategy, vision, tactics. I think a lot of people don't always know what the difference between strategy and tactics are. You get a lot of people saying, I'm into strategy. It's like, well, what does that mean? It's like some people then answer and you turn around and say, that just sounds like work, to be honest. it's a nice name. It sounds cool, but it's not just work. But yeah, putting these kind of, okay, what are the pillars? What are these things that we want people to say, okay, before we press go, does it match these pillars we put in? Make them simple. Don't lie. Nobody's going to use a strategy if they don't understand it. And that has definitely helped. And that was adopted by the whole company really, really quickly. And I think it was clarity. I think it was like, okay, we've got to this point. It's an amazing journey so far. Okay, what is the next step? Like, let's share that with people. What is the vision? What is the clarity? What are we expecting them to do? What would we like them to do on top of that if they feel they have time? Let's empower them. Let's get these things in place so people are like, okay, cool. And I've seen and also felt personally what a lack of clarity does. It's frustrating. It's like, just tell me where we're going. Why are we not doing that? Why are we doing that? So I know that even that I'm even more frustrated now. It doesn't sound like you want to tell me, but it doesn't even sound like you even know. That's not just frustrating, it's worrying. So that's why you've got to kind of share those visions and those ideas with the team. They're like, yeah, okay, I'm on board. Not just I'm on board, I love it. And now I know what I'm going to do.
How do you, the thing that's consistent theme I've often found as businesses are scaling is this sort of sense of the secret sauce that makes us special.
I've heard that before.
How do we retain that? Because we're going to have to. Often the phrase is used. We've got to do more grown-up stuff now. So there is an aversion oftentimes to how people perceive. It's not necessarily the reality, but how people perceive process and procedure, and some of the guardrails that and the platforms that you have to inevitably employ that you can scale on. You made that point about the concrete bedrock, if you like, as the foundation. Some founders, and I don't know. Lou and Stas couldn't therefore make that. I have no idea whether or not that's their feeling, but that I've certainly met founders over the years who have that kind of natural. Oh, that feels like grown up big company stuff. We don't want to be a big corporate. We do, but we don't want to do all the big corporate stuff. We want to keep the secret sauce. And did you get that? Is there that kind of? How do you manage that? How do you wrestle with that? How do you give that sense of that stuff that's no one's taking the secret sauce away. We're going to build on it. We're just going to give it a firmer foundation.
Keep it simple. Keep it simple, and
which is exactly what I should have done with my question.
No. If you make something sound complicated, the other person won't like it a lot of the time because it sounds too complicated. So the idea might actually be a good one, but you've missold the idea. If you can put an idea for, it's the Einstein thing. If you can't say it in a summarized sentence, you don't understand your topic or your subject. So we might be talking about quite important and sometimes processes that will need to scale, but just start at the beginning. Start at the beginning and build it, but don't build something on top of something that has already got layers that you might not understand. It's like a little bit like kind of taking the old wax off your surfboard before you put new wax on, or just kind of layering it on. You need to kind of understand, okay, what is that bedrock, and then put it on. Keep it simple. Don't try to baffle anybody. It's not big. It's not clever. Add to it, and also that I think that makes people understand. Feel better through the understanding that it's not like, okay, we're going to do this. It's like, we're going to do this, but we're going to do it like this over this period of time. And this is how we're going to share how that works. And this is what's expected of you. And if you need some help, we can do these other things. And then people are like, okay, cool. So what you're asking me to do is put the brick here. Yeah. And then
away you go.
The Great Wall of China.
What about challenges? What have been some of the challenges that you faced along the way?
Not being boring, not putting in too much process too quickly, not feeling like this is on me. By the way, this is just how I felt. I've been very conscious of my frustrations coming from a much larger company that was also, in my kind of latter year or so, was owned by a big corporation. So like not being a hypocrite to a degree as well, and saying, because again, I struggled, and people, and I'm more than happy to admit I struggled in some of those kind of corporate ecosystems, not bringing too much too quickly from that into where, where we need to be and when we need to be it. I think that's one of the kind of biggest challenges, and that's more my fault. That's not any challenges I've had with the team. In fact, it's literally the opposite answer if that question was asked. Like, the team is amazing. The culture is amazing. We talk about corporations and the big swanky London offices, and we've got a ping pong table and we've got fruit and all this stuff. Yeah, we have a ping pong table. It's called a jiu-jitsu mat in a gym. That's our ping pong table. We don't have fruit. Sometimes we do, but we have protein bars and electrolytes.
but there is a feeling
that's
to the place. It's a culture.
That is very much. I didn't come on here to get all cheesy and marketing around things, but I do honestly feel that the brand is based upon fantastic product that is based upon an incredible heritage in terms of the founders and also other people, in terms of their experiences within product and development, but obviously the founders in terms of what they did during their military career. A lot of brands, start a brand and then try to stick the story on it.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it.
Whereas the story was written, the brand then enveloped that and gave it a positioning, but it definitely was like this is unique, and just even if you just want to call it a logo, people create logos and a brand in the next minute it's like this and this and that, but is it really that? Is what is the substance? Like if I drop that metaphorical kind of brand egg on the floor, is it gonna smash because actually what's inside it is just kind of soggy, just not really real? Or is it going to bounce because it's there's something in there? So that weird analogy about eggs, but yeah, for me that was a big thing that I was conscious about, was that secret sauce. There is so many great things. Like let those great things, not let because it was governed, but enjoy those great things and those great people. And almost like kind of look to some of the problems and solution side of things that will help those people to enjoy and do a better job. And then ultimately things will wrap around that.
What do you think the lessons you've learned so far? What have you learned from the experience so far?
I've learned that the people, there's a different dynamic from a people perspective. And what I mean by that, I will answer the question in terms of learning. they bleed the brand. And I've learned that doesn't just happen. That is quite a kind of, you can't buy it. You can't buy that intrinsic connection with something. And let's not forget, like, it's with something that isn't like theirs. You know, they work for the brand, but it's not something that they started or they are, you know, necessarily a shareholder in or whatever. They don't see that as a job. And I've learned that when you get, and it is a little bit still secret saucy, when you get secret saucy, and that just has a absolute kind of like radiating effect into everywhere. Because you no longer do you need to ask for things to be done at that point, because people just, they want to do them, and they're seeking those problems out to solve, you know, and they're getting on with it. I've definitely learned, and maybe it's validated actually rather than learned in some ways. I've been completely validated in my own decision to move from something that I could have stayed where I was and kept my legs under the table. That definitely was an option. I've definitely learned to follow what you truly believe is the right thing to do. That's one thing I've learned. And I you know, my first day of work, you know, that was just punched me in the face as being such an important way of living your life.
It's infectious. There is a I couldn't define it. I use the phrase secret sauce, but having been to the, you know, been and met you at the office, you can feel what you're describing. You know, from an outsider coming in, it's quite infectious.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. It's something that we should all be proud of, but it's also something we need to manage as well, because I always think that, and I'm the same. My personality is one of my biggest strengths, or some of my biggest strengths are also some of my biggest weaknesses. And so I'll give you an example. So all the energy, let's do some people, if I overdo that, somebody could say he's a bit over the top, like he's a bit kind of overpowering, and you know. So I think, you know, when you look at people's personalities, and also when you look at businesses, you did I'm not saying we, you know, go through a whole SWOT analysis, but a lot of the time you go, okay, this is Tommy, like bum 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 bum. I reckon if Tommy overdid all of these things, they're probably where he gets himself into most trouble, like what people think about him and his behavior, how he is a parent, you know, and you know, things like that. My tone of voice, you know, there's a certain tone to my voice. Sometimes if that tone of voice is with children, they probably feel like they're getting shouted at. There's only a slight tweak there in my tone of voice where it went from just my voice to, there's a change there. I struggle with that. And my kids are always like, you don't need to shout at me. And I'm like, I'm not shouting at you. That sounds like I'm shouting at them. So I struggle with that. And when we look at Thrudark, like the biggest, like the people, the ideas we have, and that's just born from passion. That is one of the biggest weaknesses we have so many ideas. We don't have enough time. So that puts us in a position where we've then got to make the right choices. Because weakness is probably like kind of a bit of a stronger point, too strong a point, but you've got to manage that. Like I have to manage my tone. We've got to manage how many ideas we put in and when we put those in. And who to?
Back to knowing what to say no to again, to a degree?
Big time.
Yeah. Big
time. Like, you know, is the juice worth the squeeze and all that? That would definitely get said a lot. You know, what are the other kind of strengths of the brand? You know, it's point of view. Like, it's a massive strength of the brand. We have a clear point of view. We have a clear purpose. We have a dark website. You know, we have, you know, and we're aware of all these things, but we've also got to manage that point of view. You know, if we take our edge, which I think is a great strength, and that like proposition, if we go too much on that, it's probably going to be a little bit overpowering. if we don't manage it the other way, we're going to come across soft, and that's not us. Like as in the softness of the brand. So those kind of strengths are really important to like manage and find the right time or the right way. And that's a lot of work especially to kind of oversee those things happening across different areas of the business. But would I want it any other way? No, because then imagine you flip that and you went from a weaknesses perspective and you said, okay, what's your number one weakness? Well, nobody has any ideas. It's like, whoa. Okay, then you've got to look at, okay, why don't they have any ideas? What role are they in? And do they actually have ideas, but there's not actually a platform for them to share those ideas? That's another problem, if that is the case. So, yeah, like I said, I'm always looking at that positive side of things, but just making sure we don't allow ourselves to just like lose grip of that rope when we're belaying. It's got to be on a tight rope. International sign for belaying. Drink, belay, fun.
See, I'm fascinated by this concept of brand. So I put myself squarely in this category. Those of us, the ill-educated around brand. I know. If you said to me, Lee, what's a brand? I could probably sit here and list certain things through my life. I might it will come to the top of my mind. Like, I don't know, Apple. That seems like one that, because I've got an iPhone. It clearly works. But how you define it? What is brand to you?
To me, our brand is a community. That's what it is to us. It's brand is people. Brand is people either behind the scenes, intrinsically within the business, or our community, our members, our athletes, Foxy, Victoria, Dylan, CBS, that's the part of the brand. For us, I would definitely say that my answer to that would be community, the people within what we do. I think there's multi-layers to that as well. I think we are lucky to have, not lucky, the wrong word. I think we've worked very hard, actually, is the opposite of lucky, to establish that the brand isn't just about the physicalities, it's also about the mentalities. And that again is quite a sporting kind of thing. It's important to understand that we're not just kind of always talking about, okay, it's all about the physicals and the product. There's a lot of other more emotive parts of what we do, and we think about it. We don't just say, okay, it's January sales, so let's just go on sale. Just put a red sign on the homepage, January sale. It's like, that was the last thing we would ever do. We sit down, we're like, number one, we don't want to go on sale. We make an incredible product, and we should stand by that and be confident in it because of the amount of work that goes into it, But if you are in a situation like that, then give it some thought. Don't, and we take that same kind of mentality into what we do, and whether that is going to the gym, we think about what we're going to do. We don't just go in and mess around, and whether that's a campaign, and for me, giving a lot of thought and spending a lot of time and caring about that internally is what builds a really strong, sustainable brand that can last a long time, because it is built on a bedrock. It's solid. People care about it. People will 2 a.m. club it if needed. They won't think twice about putting the extra work in. But for me, yeah, I would say in a nutshell, the community is Thrudark, and that is a collection of absolutely everybody, no matter what level you're involved at, whether you're the founder or whether you've bought a pair of socks. You are part of that brand.
You're a big exponent of the of the Jack Welch 4E and 1P framework.
I am, yeah.
We talked about this, didn't we? So,
yeah, we did.
So what does that mean to you, and how do you incorporate that approach into your working practices?
So that's something that I've had to also manage really quite diligently, because I think that's a bit. I think that the 4Es and 1P, as well as Jack's overall philosophy, could actually be weaponized if it's not and actually abused.
Yep.
Maybe a bit too much of a over the top comment there, but I truly believe it could be in the wrong hands.
Because what are they? Is it energy,
energize,
edge,
execute, and passion.
All of which arguably could be abused.
They could be definitely abused.
You can overstretch on some of those,
absolutely,
undeniably.
And that kind of comes back to like your strengths and your weaknesses a little bit. Also, things like Jack said about the ABC structure around, the amount of people that worked underneath Jack. I think it's like, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody whoever can kind of point out, fact check me, but like during his tenure, like hundreds of thousands of people, were fired or made redundant under Jack. But he had a very, very clear.
From a performance perspective, was it 10% of the workforce annually that they used to cut?
Something like that.
Something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, those were the C players. Yeah. But then you could read those kind of ABCs and think, okay, if you don't read it correctly and really absorb yourself into it, somebody read that and you immediately said, okay, who are the best? The A's, the B's, the C's. Most people would say the worst of the C's and the best of the A's. Not correct. Definitely how you're looking at the C's was how Jack looked at them. But when you read even closer into it, the people running a lot of businesses are your B's. So those types of things started really impacting me, because I think it's really important to get a inclusive, cohesive business where, you need structure and you do definitely need hierarchy sometimes, but you also need to understand like who is moving those rocks a lot of the time. For me, the 4Es and 1P, it started to be a little bit of a management tool. It was like not a tick boxing exercise, no. But like looking at people in their roles. And a big thing is, if you're part of a brand and your brand is ultimately successful or not based on the product that you produce. We're selling product. Let's not kind of like kid ourselves about that as a fact. It's a fact. Do those people have the energy to do their job? Do they get you going? Do they want to make you feel like, yeah, let's fucking go and do this? Put in a serious situation, the yes no's, do they have the edge to say, no, we're not doing this. We're not going to go over to that beach and have a barbecue because this is our compass. This is where we're going. That's the decision making. And also, can they ultimately get the job done? There's the execution part. If they can do those things and absolutely wrap it up in like 6 layers of passion gift wrap, can they do that? Then that for me is an important part of especially certain areas of a business. Now, people would say, well, hang on a second, how does that work for somebody who's, or that could work for somebody who's quite extrovert, but how does that work for somebody who's quite introvert? You can't say to somebody who's introvert and maybe analytical, come on, get me going. Because they'd probably be thinking, like, okay, how do you want me to get you going? You're like, no, just inspire me. So I think, like anything in life, there has to be a balance of when you do kind of lean into that and how hard you lean into it. But for me, working predominantly around teams of commercial people, marketeers, salespeople, product, that definitely has been something that has kind of shown the way really for me, and how also I think I've been quite successful to a degree because I can get people going, I think, sometimes.
So what really, ordinarily I would ask at this juncture, what excites you about the future for Thrudark? But I'm more inclined to say what excites you about Thrudark, because I think there's a present reality that's exciting about where the organisation is at now, and also arguably at where it can go. So I guess it's kind of two questions in one. It's like what excites you about where you are today, what excites you about where you're going?
You definitely seamless link me then. I was going to try and be clever and do the same as what you just did and split those, but I'm just going to have to roll with it now. You've done it for me. The golden years. These next couple of years are golden. Like let's say the next 5 years. I would say we have our 5-year anniversary on the 26th of May. So we're 5 years old. And where the business is and the brand is in comparison to the startup kind of launch party, what an incredible kind of achievement that is, especially on Louis and Stas's shoulders, and again the support from investors and shareholders around them. Like that is an amazing achievement, especially through the last, let's layer on the last couple of years and what's happened.
Absolutely, and I think someone inevitably and rightly someone would fact check me on this, but I think I'm right in saying that something like 4 out of 5 businesses don't make it to their 5th year.
I've heard something very similar. Yeah, I'll go with it.
It's certainly the majority don't. The significant majority don't. So that in itself is a milestone.
Absolutely, and then when you say, okay, we're making performance outdoor clothing, of which in Europe, the competitive market scene that is pretty vast.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people doing that. And again, the last couple of years economically and et cetera. So the next, let's call it the next 3 to 5 years. What excites me is those golden years of exploring. Sorry, I've said it again there. Exploring what we can do, what we could do. But I think the most important thing now is we're putting that foundation in to allow us to then start exploring and then being able to trust the base camp, let's call it.
Yeah.
The base camp is there, the tents are all nailed in, now we can go and explore. Whereas at the moment there's a little bit of checking on the tents, metaphorically speaking, are the pegs all in? Okay, etc. Once that's done, which is pretty much very close to being set up, once that camp is set up, then we can go and put some first ascents in and explore new categories, new regions, new areas. And then after that, I think for me it's being able to walk down the street past a Thrudark shop, just personally.
Be exciting to see.
Obviously we have a fantastic retail partnership with Selfridges at the moment. But just imagine what Thrudark could do with a shop, because it definitely wouldn't be a shop. It would be a massive experience. And I don't think people would want to leave. Then we won't let them leave. We'd be choking them out on the jits mat. But yeah.
Just literally have a mat, wouldn't you? That'd be fantastic. Great fun.
Are you going to buy it?
So you've mentioned mentors consistently. You've referenced mentors through the course of our conversation. Who would you say have been some of those great influences on your career, and why?
Rob absolutely was a mentor. Yeah, first and foremost. I spent 40% of my life at Osprey. Nearly 16 years, and kind of 13, 14 years of that was essentially alongside Rob. Absolutely. Without a doubt, Rob was a key individual in terms of mentorship and sharing the wealth of knowledge that he had. And also supporting me just naturally through my years. He's getting married, having kids, moving house, and I think I was a sales director at the age of 30. He trusted in me. I think that I was talking to somebody the other day, actually, and it was about kind of how people are in the right place at the right time, and somebody ends up being, a certain position in a company, but actually it's just because they were in with the company. The thing with Rob, that would have never happened. I mean this as I mean this is a compliment to him. He just doesn't like suffer fools. You know, he
It
can't.
was based on ability, right? Not tenure or circumstance, but on ability and capability.
And some of that's capability and ability was mine. But some of that I learned from him.
But he obviously saw, he could spot the talent. He could spot where you could go.
Yeah. Hopefully, yeah. That I would say that's probably true. And his leadership to me through certain times in my life were really, you know, invaluable. I would also say that, you know, that team of directors that we had, the kind of close team of directors that we had. Another person is Dagna, who's the finance director. She is very inspirational. Originally moved over from Lithuania and, you know, worked 2 jobs and like learned kind of the dark arts of finance, you know, in their evenings, you know, when she wasn't like, you know, she was having a family and children, you know, and she's an incredibly resilient person. So I think she also kind of mentored me in some ways. And I think what is mentorship? You know, it's kind of, it's sharing, I think. It's like sharing like knowledge. It's sharing emotions. I think it's trust. It's being able to say, I think you're being a bit of a dick, if you want my honest opinion. And that other person say, yeah, you're absolutely right, I'm sorry. And vice versa. You know, it's that just kind of like, it's that kind of really pure relationship, I think. And, you know, for me, I've definitely gone through, you know, reading different books as well, like in terms of that. And yeah, there's a lot of people, I wouldn't class them as mentors like I would with, you know, with Rob and Dagna, but I would definitely say that I've learned a lot of things from people who are highly regarded in the business world.
So who or what do you admire?
I think principles. I really admire, I'm going to sound really old-fashioned in some ways, but I really admire principles and values. I really admired that about the team at Thrudark and the branding around, you know, the values that they have, honesty, integrity, etc. You know, for me, like, okay, you've got brand values, okay, like, okay, put me in front of these people and like, it's just like radiates, you know, and so it's very easy to put it on a piece of paper, but it's actually really hard to, you know, to show it and to practice what you preach. That's what I admire. I admire people with principles, and I'll go even a little bit kind of medieval and say manners and being able to say sorry is a big thing for me. You know, I try to, maybe I'm a bit over the top at home sometimes with the kids. You know, I think kids I think kids will naturally, especially at my children's age, find it hard to say sorry because they might not quite understand why they're saying sorry. But I think a lot of this comes from, again, spending a lot of time with grandparents and my parents as well. But having grandparents in my life, you know, which not a lot of people sometimes have, you know, the honor and the pleasure of having, you know, some people, like how old am I? 41 nearly. You know, and I have kind of 2 sets of grandparents still alive. Which I don't know how abnormal or normal that is, but you talk to some people and they unfortunately don't anymore. But I think that kind of, that trickle down approach about principles and values and manners and all those things are really important to me. And I think if somebody was 90% like skill and like 10% principle, for me it would be hard for me to get along with somebody like that. You know, I'd want a really good healthy mix. You know, it's, and I'm not just talking about work, I'm talking about friends as well. You know, it's like, if you're working with somebody and they're like blowing out the park and they're like, wow, he's amazing. Yeah, well, he's also a bit of, obviously we do have the Thrudark saying, which I don't know whether we should share on.
It's entirely up to you. It's your platform.
Obviously we do have the DBAC, which we get asked a lot. What does DBAC stands for? Don't be a C word.
Yeah.
And that comes back into that whole point I was talking about, being mentored and having that connection with people. If your mate's been, I won't say the C word, if your mate's been a dick, he's not your mate if you can't say you are being a dick.
Yeah.
He's definitely not part of the 2 a.m. club, for sure. No. So I definitely like position myself a little bit around that principle way of behaving.
So what drives you?
That's changed. That's changed a lot over my life, which I guess it naturally would anyway. I don't think that's probably kind of an earth-shocking revelation. I'd probably go at it in terms of what drove me when, and what I wish and regret didn't drive me as much as it should. Success drove me, definitely, and numbers, results drove me, I think, kind of in my 20s and early 30s. I think I was definitely kind of hooked into results. It's kind of like having a bit of a kind of sandwich here, because before that, I do genuinely think that as a child and kind of through your teens, I think I was more driven by experiences and joy, as you naturally have when you're a kid. And then as I've come out of the stage of results, unfortunately, I learned too late around being driven by people. And I think that's, and also as a parent as well, kind of definitely, again, like no blaming anybody else other than myself. I definitely made some wrong choices in terms of where I chose to spend my time at certain times in my life with kids, which I totally regret. But yeah, how I now change that is something that I also have to learn as well, and that's difficult for me sometimes to think, well, I'm fairly proficient in some of the things I do in my life, but actually in other ways, I need to learn still a lot, in being a better parent in some ways. So I was a bad parent, but in terms of, I just feel there's sometimes probably a disparity between my confidence in being a parent, because I was actually away a lot when my kids were younger. And I think that I didn't learn how to do it because I wasn't there, but that was my choice that I wasn't there. So I regret that. And what drives me now, was a bit of a roundabout way, but I just wanted to give some context, is what drives me now is more around being a better parent, probably a better husband at the same time, being a better friend to people. I've lost contact with friends over the years, probably because I was too busy focusing on certain things. But so kind of, reconnecting, I guess, with that. And also like going back into like why am I here? What is my kind of, what was my trajectory? A lot of it started from standing on top of that first mountain in North Wales, so also what drives me is showing my kids what I was shown,
I think you make a really interesting point. I think that through childhood, we're not necessarily, we don't have that same obsession, broad sweeping statement, never a good premise, but we don't have that obsession with necessarily the outcome. We love the process, right? The joy comes from, you want to climb a mountain, but the joy is climbing.
The playing.
Yeah, it's playing. And then we go through a spell in varying degrees, varying people affects in different ways, where it's all about the goal.
Yeah.
Did I get the goal?
Yeah.
Did I? But then you start to then reflect back. And I think it's an experience teaches you that actually there is a balance, right? So it's good to know what the goal is, but if you start to focus on the process, the joy starts to reemerge. And I think it begs the question as to what success means to you. Given that you seem to have got to that point whereby you're starting to see that kind of balance is the fact that you're even acknowledging it suggests that there's a balance there between the process and the joy of the playing. There's still the goals, there's still, but so what does success mean to you?
I don't know yet. I'll come and tell you when I'm 90. I don't think I'm there at all. I think success, what I would like success to be in my world is to be able to say that the things I know at this time in my life that I need to get better at, I've got better at. I think that would be success.
Away from work, family man, clearly we've touched on that. So how do you unwind? How do you relax? Do you relax?
I find it very hard relaxing sometimes. I'll give you a reason for that. I'm happy to share it. I've definitely suffered from anxiety over the years. I actually had a little bit kind of CBT therapy, etc. I know it's not. I know a lot of people have that, and I'm a big advocate for somebody. A lot of people should talk more, and if they want to talk to somebody who has a very kind of neutral stance on it, then that's really helpful. The reason I said that, it sounded a bit random to the question that you asked, is I actually find it quite hard to relax.
Yeah.
I don't really like watching television. It's just not something that I'm into. I definitely find that going to the gym is actually quite, for me, it's quite relaxing. But the reason it's relaxing is because I'm getting rid of my energy. Yeah. So it's not like relaxing as in sitting with my feet up relaxing. It's almost like I know that through putting the effort into an hour of kind of whatever I'm doing, I can then relax. I can't just sit down and go and relax. I have to get rid of energy before I relax, really. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It does.
Sorry, ramblings of a madman.
I think you make a really interesting point, which I'm thinking now as to the question, what is relaxing? We have this perception of relaxing. You made the point, I don't really enjoy it. Put words in your mouth, but I don't really watch a lot of TV, don't really enjoy it. Well, that's interesting because we do have this sense of, relaxation is feet up. What actually is it? That's what I'm now thinking. I'm thinking that through, thinking actually in many ways it's a daft question because what is relaxation? Different people relax in different ways. Yeah. So as you talk for you, it's in the gym. Well, if that's, all the benefits to that are well documented anyway, aren't they? But if that's what you need to experience relaxation, who am I to define, well, that doesn't sound like relaxing? Because what one person's relaxation is not another person's, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Where I think the difference between going to the gym and exerting, which for me is kind of helps, is kind of in between process of being able to, I guess, conventionally relax, is the outdoors. That is that is an area where I think I am able to actually sit down and just relax because things are going on that I feel connected to. And for me going camping with the kids and stuff like that, I can actually, it's a bit of a contradiction, but I guess I know why, because they're very different things, is I can actually just sit in a chair in a field. That to me is like pure relaxation, but that's very different between sitting in a chair in your front room.
But there's a connectedness there, isn't there, to nature and the great outdoors. Yeah, and again, lots of research would lead us to conclude that there's nothing but goodness that comes from that.
No, I think for me, like that, that somebody said to me the other day, sorry, just coming to my head, so I thought I'd share it, is, do you live on the earth or in the earth? So I'll TM him. Mr. Nix at Thrudark came up with that absolute gem. What I would say is the gym thing is more of me living on the earth, but the outdoor side of that is the in thing. It's a more spiritual rather than physical connection. Like the physicalities of it is doing something to me that makes me feel better. Like, not just physically better, but I mean just well-being better. Whereas the outdoors is a different drug, isn't it? It's a different effect. Yeah, I thought I'd share that with you just because I've been wrestling with that
one. My next question is kind of we've talked about being present, which I wholeheartedly agree with, and I'm now going to ask you what does the future look like for you? but inevitably begs that question. What does the future look like for you? Where are you headed?
It's a balance, right? We can talk about the precious present, and then it's exciting to think about the future. I want to put more time into less things. That's what I want to do in the future.
I like that. Now that is a phrase I could get on board with. Put more time into less things. It's a lovely way of looking at life.
Yeah, I nearly, somebody will go, he's read Matthew McConaughey. He's on about the 3 A's rather than the 5 D's. I guess I am. Yeah, it's like, I'm not like going over the top, but like if somebody said, if the worst came to the worst, okay, like I'm not getting morbid, but somebody said to you, okay, you've got 24 hours, and I know this is a bit morbid, but you know exactly where you would go and who you would spend your time with. It wouldn't matter how much money you had in the bank or what kind of car you drove home in. It wouldn't matter how big your house is, because you're going to sit in the same room as the people you want to spend that amount of time. So it doesn't matter shit about all that other stuff. So why do we only think that way when we're giving the ultimatum? Why don't we think that way before we're actually... But the ultimatum is coming. The ultimatum is just, instead of being so overly aggressive as in 24 hours, I could turn around and say, okay, let's not say 24 hours and, the apocalypse, but I'm 40. Let's say in 40 years. It's okay, you've been given a timeline. Why are you going to treat it any differently? You get to like 75, you're like, oh shit, actually I've only got 5 left. I better do something about it now. Well, there's no point at that point. So like I think the perspective that people take upon time and where they spend that time and actually what actually matters. I'm not very good at that. I'm not sitting here and saying, yeah, I've got all this like mapped out, I know, I know how to do this. I don't. No, I'm still learning how to do that, but it's something I want to get better at. I would say that's what the future looks like for me, is to get more attached to those really important things and do a much better job around them.
Tommy, it's been great to speak with you.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate your time. I think there's so much to take away. It all comes back to consistently throughout endeavour through adversity. That theme of, we've touched on serendipity of moments and sliding doors and left and right turns and right place, right time. But, the beauty of the connections that you've enjoyed along the way and how those serendipitous moments have prevailed to land you where you are today, and the journey that you're now on with Thrudark. And the community you're building around it and the excitement and the feel of where the brand is heading, I think you can sense it. So I think, we look forward to watching you guys continue to flourish. There'll be inevitably a lot of blood, sweat and tears goes into making these things happen, but it's a really exciting time. I wish you every success.
Thanks.
And I really appreciate your time in Canada this afternoon. It's been great to speak with you.
I've loved it. Thanks for the opportunity.
Brilliant. All the best.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Tommy.
See you.